everybody. I am Tommy, and you are on the Lifeboat, the Love Boat, formerly known as the Lifeboat. It's the boat. Jane Aldrich, good to see you. Tommy Bird, man, been thinking about you. It's the real Mr. Mod. How are you? Jane Aldrich is here. Cindy, good to have you here. Brock Bandy, my man. What's happening? There's Barbara. John, what's happening? Barbara, I'm glad you're here. John, good to see you. SingStar Clothing. You know what? Let's put him up there for a second, shall we? We should probably talk about that. My man was on last night. If you have not seen it, well, shame on you. Why are you not watching? But I believe he's down to needing about 7 or 8 people. If you have not subbed, can I get a mod to put his link up there? If you have not subbed to my man, you need to get this done so that he can go live. He's going to do an interview with me over there in the very beginning. It would be very mad. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. I mispronounced your name. I didn't misgender you, did I? Because I'm guilty of that. I do it all the time. Sandy Randy, good to see you. Space Jeezel. Shut the front door. It's good to see you. Glad that you are here. You know, Charles Manson sells books, man. It is going to be an interesting one. And you know what's cool about this is, so the first time I read Helter Skelter, I think I was in 8th grade. My brother, Johnny, had the book. It was in my dad's bookshelf. My dad had a huge library, and every book in that library he had read. And it was about that age where you start hearing about, you know, some of the crazy stuff like serial killers and people that are famous for being, well, just nasty, I guess, right? Not good people. Make sure you hit the subscribe button on that, people, even if you got to go do it right now. I really want to be able to go live with him. Thank you, guys. I appreciate the mods putting that up there. Yeah, I think we only need 7. So let's get that done, man. I want to get that taken care of. So Johnny read the book, and then I read it afterwards. And it was a disturbing book as a youngster to read. This is a book, Helter Skelter, by Vincent Bugliosi. And I think it's important if we just do a little bit of history, right? 1969. Summer of Love, right? All of that stuff. The hippies are all over the place. It's kind of a cool time to be around. The 60s were great. People were all sleeping with one another. Everybody was dropping in, tuning out, and all of that jazz. A lot of LSD, a lot of weird drugs. And it seemed to be a time where people started to believe in peace and love. And the whole hippie thing was starting to gain some traction. In the United States, the Vietnam War was going on, right? And we also had a counterculture that was thriving in a way that hadn't happened before. This is an interesting time in America, but the Central Intelligence Agency at the time was running something that they called Operation Chaos, hence the name of Mr. O'Neill's book. Operation Chaos was designed to infiltrate the counterculture. And of course, the CIA wants to infiltrate the counterculture. It makes a lot of sense. My understanding was that the Central Intelligence Agency wasn't supposed to work within U.S. borders. Perhaps I'm ignorant, but I thought the Central Intelligence Agency was supposed to be the arm of our government that, you know, the FBI handles everything inside the United States. The Central Intelligence Agency sends spies to other countries, James Bond style stuff, right, to go get information and try to protect the homeland, so to speak. However, there's a lot that was going on with the Black Panther movement, and they were tied up in all of this. And the CIA ended up getting busted on all of this in something called COINTELPRO was the big bust that people broke into an office and got files. That's the only reason we know anything ever that happens with the Central Intelligence Agency is we get lucky, right? Somebody broke in and stole files, and those files got leaked to major outlets. And they knew all of a sudden that the Central Intelligence Agency was doing everything within its power to infiltrate these organizations because they felt it was a threat to our country. Keep in mind that as we go through this, because now, 1969, and we have the Tate LaBianca murders. First, Sharon Tate and a group of people at her house on CeeLo Drive. This is the narrative from the book Helter Skelter. Right, this is Vincent Bugliosi, who prosecuted Charles Manson. And what happened is Vincent Bugliosi took all of the evidence, looked at it, and what he came up with was a theory that he called Helter Skelter. If you're thinking, I've heard that before, It's probably because it's a song on the White Album. When I get to the bottom, I go back to the top of the slide. It was kind of the Beatles, I don't know, foray into some more heavy rock. It's got more of a hard rock sound than most of what you're used to with the Beatles. There are people that claim it was the first heavy metal song. I don't know about all that. It may be. I don't know enough about the subject matter, but they do say that. Susie Hughes, good to see you. I am glad that you are here. Natalie, how are you? So Vincent Bugliosi catches the case, and he begins to put together this theory that Charlie and his followers, who live at a place called Spawn Ranch. Now, Spawn Ranch used to be a movie set. So his westerns and things were filmed out there, and Charlie and his crew are living there. But in reality, in the 60s, Vietnam War, etc., CIA lied and worked in America. Not sure if George Bush was in charge of the CIA at that time or later. Yeah, just Joan, there was a lot going on in this time, right? Shout out to Trent Reznor buying the Tate house and totally falling apart after the fact because he was haunted. Well, you know what? I've actually heard. I've heard that. I don't know why you'd want to buy that house anyway. I kind of feel like that house should have been like the house on Gretna Green, right? I think that was the name of the street where O.J. Simpson killed his wife and Ron Goldman. You know, if you're going to buy that house, tear it down and put up another one, right? It just seems to me like that probably isn't a part of history that needs to remain. Although, you know, there are people that would probably argue that. There are a lot of people who are really enthralled with this story, but some really heinous stuff went on in that house. And out at Spawn Ranch, Charlie Manson is hanging out with a bunch of kids that felt disenfranchised. A lot of these were spoiled kids. They were kids whose parents had a lot of money, but kind of ran away to Spawn Ranch. And Charlie was running by, depending on who you believe, right, that it's kind of a little sex cult going out there. There was an awful lot of sex happening. And Charles Manson did feed these people a lot of dope. He claims that they did weed, hash, things like that. He fed them a lot of acid. There's a lot of truth to that. He also says that he was not into speed. In interviews, he said he hated that stuff. There was a lot of MDA at the time. That's methyl dioxy amphetamine. If that sounds familiar, it's because methylene dioxy methamphetamine is MDMA ecstasy. This was kind of a precursor to it, and they used to call it the hug drug. So this was a little bit before ecstasy, but it kind of was doing the same thing. It's not just straight meth. This is one of those things that got people hugging one another, right? So Charlie was selling that as well. Here's the funny thing. Charlie was out on probation, and he kept getting busted over and over and over again. Normally, when you get busted on probation, you go back to jail. He actually got busted with drugs. He got busted with a gun. These are absolutely charges that you're not going to get a probation department to allow you to stay out on, especially if you're a career criminal. And Charlie had been. He had spent almost his entire life incarcerated. He had never been violent. The one thing about Charlie is he was a thief. He was a car thief. He was a petty thief. He stole to support his life because he didn't have a mother, didn't have a father. And that's kind of just how he lived. I'm not giving Charlie a pass. He was a bad human being. But he didn't have a hell of a start to life, right? Charles Willis Manson didn't come into this earth with a lot going for him. His mom was a prostitute, by all accounts, and Charlie just didn't have an easy life. He was in youth homes at a very young age. He ran away from those, but he was in and out constantly. He was doing life on the installment plan. Is Adderall the same thing? It is not. Adderall is a drug given to people. It is definitely an amphetamine, right? But the MDA adds another drug to it, another chemical to it, that changes the drug to make it more sensory, right? More like ecstasy. Amphetamines will keep you awake. It'll help you concentrate, right? Some would call it tweaking, right? But you focus on one thing and it's very hard to get off it. God forbid you start looking for blackheads or zits on your face. There are people that have permanently scarred themselves through that process. We probably have all seen one or two of those in our life. But MDA was more of a sensory drug that caused people to feel like they wanted to hug and touch each other and rub on each other, very much like Molly, right? What they call it today, or ecstasy is what we called it in my generation. Same family, right? So ecstasy, MDMA, all of these are methyl-based drugs, which means you're going up. Your heart rate's going to speed up, all of those things. The difference is that MDA, as opposed to just being MA, which would be methamphetamine, there is another drug put in there that is going to, another chemical that when it all gets put together makes you very, I don't know, you're very aware of everything. You feel things that's very different. It's more like ecstasy, just a low rent version of it. Timu ecstasy, I guess. And by full disclosure, this is a drug I haven't done. By the time I was getting into that part of the world, MDMA was king, and ecstasy was everywhere, and in a lot of states it was still legal. So that's what I had done. But MDA, from all the research I've been able to do on it, is a very similar drug. In fact, they called it the hug drug, and ecstasy was called the love drug. So it was a very similar. It was a precursor. Like, the chemists hadn't really gotten rowdy. And more than likely what happened is, because we're not bright in the United States, we probably made MDA illegal. So the scientists were like, well, we need to play with it a little bit more. So, methylene dioxyamphetamine went to methylene dioxymethamphetamine. It wasn't a massive change, but it was a change. And it probably kept them under the radar, because in America, we used to say, this is illegal. And you could change a couple of chemicals and say, all right, well, now this is not that. Finally, they started doing stuff like methyl-based drugs without a prescription are illegal. Now it doesn't matter how good your chemist is, you're going to get busted one way or the other, right? So Charles Manson is living on a Spawn Ranch, and he's committing petty crimes. He's selling dope. He's doing all these things, and he has a decent-sized group of followers. He sends these followers, allegedly, he sends these followers out to go start a race war. He's going to do this by killing a famous actress, right, Sharon Tate. And the other people that were at the house. These are high rent districts. They're going into Hollywood. They're killing people that are famous. And they're going to take their wallets with credit cards and all that and go drop it in the predominantly black part of town. Because once those guys get a hold of that, it'll be traced back to the blacks. And he told his followers, allegedly told his followers, that this was going to start the helter-skelter, right, race war. During these killings, in blood, things were written on the wall, like Piggies, which is another song on the White Album. Helter Skelter was written on there as well. Die Pigs was carved into one victim's stomach. All of these things, Vincent Bugliosi said, Charles Manson believed the Beatles were talking to him, trying to tell him to bring on the race war. And Charlie and his people were going to go out in the desert, crawl into a hole, and when the race war was really heating up and almost over, he was going to come out and lead the blacks and be the voice of reason or whatever. It's absolutely phenomenal that this is what he sold the people in the court. But you have to think about the time at hand. These murders were horrific. They were terrifying. Sharon Tate was very, very pregnant and got stabbed a lot in her stomach, right? It was a brutal, unbelievable killing that left a bunch of people dead. And it just seems so senseless. This got blamed on hippies. It got blamed on the free love people. And very often people will say that Manson and the Tate LaBianca murders ended the summer of love. All of a sudden, there was no more of that, hippies are all about peace, love, and all of that stuff. Now they were feared. Now people saw hippies and thought, oh man, they're going to come in here and do satanic rituals on me. And it really, well, it sure as hell helped Operation Chaos. Now, I'm not saying that was by design. I'm not. But it sure helped, because people went from thinking that hippies were peaceful, loving people to that they were psychopaths. And it created a very different environment. They catch Charlie, right? And his followers start to sing. And they bring in Vincent Bugliosi. And it's interesting because they bring him in on the 18th of August, right? And when they were going through the Sharon Tate household, they found a videotape. And the videotape allegedly had some homemade porn, right? They had made a sex tape, but this was in the days before sex tapes, because we're talking about the 60s. However, Roman Polanski, who lived there, was a director, a famous film director. He did Rosemary's Baby. One of the other, the guy that lived in the house, he was not there during the murders. His best friend was a Polish gentleman who was also a guy that made movies. The point being, they had equipment. And allegedly, there is a sex tape. That's not allegedly. This is an absolute proven fact. But allegedly, that sex tape had some pretty foul stuff on it. Large group scenes. Allegedly, and I'm not trying to smut up anybody, but this is right from the book, Sharon Tate allegedly was being not treated particularly well sexually by two men. Kind of a Diddy thing, where Roman Polanski allegedly brought two guys in to have sex with his wife, and he filmed it. Now, when the police found this, Vincent Bugliosi came out and said, we returned the tape after Roman Polanski looked at it. We didn't want to embarrass anybody. So once he had said, I don't want this out or anything else, we respected that and we gave it back to him. The trouble is this: Roman Polanski was not in the United States, right, when Vincent Bugliosi announced this. And the crazier part is he took over the case it was 1 day after the case was taken over that he announced this, which didn't make any sense. And this is the first of a lot of things that didn't make sense. A lot of evidence got destroyed, got shredded. His notebooks, which supposedly come up with this entire theory, have huge sections of it blacked out and redacted. And his story for that is, yeah, that wasn't making sense, and I was working through this as I was going. Well, maybe that's the truth. But there's a lot of evidence that says a lot of things that he found, he never turned over to the prosecution. There was a lot of things that he found that he cherry picked. Now, normally when you do you get arrested, you're going to get your discovery, as the Charles Manson should have got discovery. And everything that Bugliosi and the police department had found about anything having to do with this case had to be turned over so that they can try to defend themselves against these. That includes exculpatory evidence. If you find something that can hurt your case, you still have to hand that over, right? Tara says, Helter Skelter's interesting book. If you read Chaos as long as Tom O'Neill isn't lying, of course, trust the process. Well, here's the thing about that, Tara, because you make a good point, right? You have to trust the authors. One of them, the Vincent Bugliosi, wrote a book when he was in court. He had publishers sitting in the second row. He was planning on writing this book before he had even prosecuted Manson. This is another problem. So if you compare the two books, O'Neill studied for 20 years before he wrote this book. It started out, that's Chaos. When O'Neill wrote Chaos, he spent 20 years researching this. The footnotes are as exhaustive as anything I've ever seen. It's absolutely maddening how much research this guy did. And he doesn't just say, hey, I heard somebody say this. He tells you where he was, who was there, whether it was recorded. He is a beast in terms of doing research, right? Many Manson followers wrote bios and disagreed with Helter Skelter. Some agreed, though. Well, yes. But the ones that agreed worked with the prosecution more than the ones that didn't. They had a vested interest to sort of work with the narrative of Vincent Bugliosi's. Now, one of the family members, Bousselet, there was a recording of him talking to his family, and allegedly he spilled his guts. There was a lot of things that he said that did not match up exactly with the narrative of Helter Skelter. That tape was in the possession of Vincent Bugliosi. It is nowhere to be found. It has been destroyed, but people know it exists. There were people that checked it in as evidence. When things disappear and don't get handed over to the defense, something bad is happening, right? There are all kinds of bad things going on. Now, let's just suspend disbelief, and we'll talk about the book. The core narrative is this race war Helter Skelter thing. Now, when Vincent Bugliosi told the prosecutor and the police this, he was laughed at. These people had been investigating it, and every one of them, to a man, said, this is ridiculous. There's no race war here. What they had found was way different. What they had found was this. The home that Sharon Tate died in was not her home. It was being sublet to her, right, by Terry Melcher, who was Doris Day's kid. He also worked in the music industry, right? And this was hello, squirrel. This was a guy that had a bunch of pull in the music industry. And he was introduced to Charles Manson by the drummer of the Beach Boys, Dennis Wilson. Dennis Wilson, by all accounts, was partying really hard. He had gone out to Spawn Ranch. He had even brought out recording equipment to record Charles Manson. In the process, Melcher went out there as well and said that Charlie was either going to get a recording deal or a documentary. Now, this isn't in the book, but I think this is worth mentioning. Charlie spent his entire life in prison, right? All of it. For real. The man had spent his entire life in prison from about the time he was old enough to think. He was in youth homes and youth authorities and jails, federal, state. If you say something, right, and you don't come through with it, they will kill you for 50 cents. If you tell a guy in prison that, yeah, I owe you $4 and I'm going to pay you on Tuesday, you'll hear him all the time say, it's not about the money. It's the principle of the thing. And this is a big thing in prison. Your word better be really good. In fact, I've said this before on here, but what they say in there is this. If all you got in prison is your word and your testicles, And if your word isn't any good, then your balls better be. I mean, that's basically the expression. And I think Charlie was promised a record deal. We know that this is there's a lot of truth to back this up, or a documentary. He was like the Messiah rocker, is kind of what they were trying to say they were going to do with him. He didn't get that. And the house that Sharon Tate was in, they were going over there to deal with Melcher. This is the theory of the police. They were going over there to deal with Melcher and make him pay for what he did to Charlie. Instead, they found other people in there, but they had been instructed, allegedly, to kill everyone in there. But it was more of a revenge thing. But that doesn't help the narrative. That doesn't make these guys look like crazy hippies or just dangerous people. Instead, what it made it look like was, well, this is a lunatic. It's a one-off, right? And both, all of these people allegedly were doing drugs. When they went through the house, Sharon Tate's house, they found a lot of drugs. Well, there was hash, there was MDA, there's a lot of weed. And this sort of led into a theory that the police had because of the video, that they had a lot of people come into that house for wild sex parties. And perhaps Manson and his crew got sent away from there. And that's one of the reasons they were angry. But all of these theories went as soon as Vincent Bugliosi decided he wanted to write a book. Sorry, but that's really the way it looks. And people love the guy. Vincent Bugliosi does great interviews. But if you do a little research on him, and the guy that wrote Chaos does, he's got a checkered record that's pretty nasty, right? Including stalking a guy for a year and a half and terrorizing his family. And he believed that his wife had been knocked up by a milkman. No joke. And by the way, no truth to it, but he believed it. So he terrorized the milkman and the milkman's family, including his wife and his kids. And this went on for 16 months, right? He got in trouble for it. But Vincent Bugliosi is a guy that has got a lot of really weird and checkered stuff, man, right? Really weird and checkered stuff. So Manson goes to court and puts on zero defense. If you ever listen to any Charlie interviews, he's pissed. He said there was no trial. It was a joke. There was no trial. It was a joke. There wasn't a defense put on for Charles Manson of any kind. There was no. They weren't chasing down any of these leads. So here's where it gets crazy. Charlie was going to a clinic the whole time that he was in. The whole time that he was out in the near the Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. Haight-Ashbury had a free clinic. The free clinic would help hippies that couldn't afford medicine or other things. If you needed to see a shrink or any of these, you could go out and do this. However, it had a doctor in there by the name of Jolly. And this guy worked for the Central Intelligence Agency. Kelly, good to see you. Ashley, what's happening? Kevin Hawthorne, glad you're here. He worked for the Central Intelligence Agency. And this clinic was more of a way, they said, to spy on the counterculture. Okay, right? They admit that they were trying to infiltrate the counterculture out there. More than likely, what they were doing, because this fell in that magic period where we were still doing MK Ultra. And MK Ultra was based on experiments. This is not a conspiracy theory. This thing happened 1953 to 1972 or something like that. Might have been 74. But this happened. It is absolutely a fact that this went on. Charlie's defense team, I believe, was just, no one on earth knows their names because there literally wasn't a defense put up. It was just sad. Manson, as a child, sold to a guy for dope for his mom. No wonder. Yeah, his childhood. I could go over his childhood. He was allegedly raped often in the kids' homes. He denied that because he was a convict, and the only way you're going to take that from me is if you kill me. And that sounds great when you're 35. When you're 13, they're gonna do things to you. And Charlie didn't run away from one of those youth homes. I mean, he broke out and ran away because what was happening to him and there was bad. And he came clean to a guy that wrote a book. And after the book came out, he denied everything. So Charlie had a terrible, terrible childhood, but he never turned violent. This was a guy that just stole things to survive. He stole cars and drove to other states. He seemed to always be trying to run from himself until he starts going to this clinic. Now, at the same time, he's going to this clinic and seeing the Dr. Jolly. And this is all research that was done by Tom O'Neill, from the guy that wrote Chaos. But as he's going to this clinic, he's also getting busted constantly, right? Constantly. Yeah, this is a good point. Tara says, why was he kicked out of Mexico? Then his PO sent him to Mexico, for example. First of all, how does a guy on paper go to Mexico? What they let him do, you walk across a border on paper, they're going to pick you up and you're going to end up going back. Why do you hate me? Barbara, I wasn't aware of the fact that I hated you, but Maybe you can bring me up to speed. I'm not exactly sure on that one, but I'm willing to learn. Anyway, while he's going in there and getting dosed with LSD, allegedly, he's also bringing LSD back to Spawn Ranch, bunches of it. And by all accounts, what he's doing at Spawn Ranch absolutely mirrors what they're doing at the clinic and what they're doing in Canada. He was doing what MK Ultra allegedly may have done to him. Now, I don't know if this would be a massive shocker because we kind of saw this with the Sirhan thing, right? He allegedly was also being worked on by people from MK Ultra, and during his lunch breaks, he would try to hypnotize the people that worked with him. I believe, and I think that there's a lot of evidence that backs it up, that Charles Manson had a lot of help from the government, because I know enough about probation to tell you that if by some chance your PO gets salty, right, you can go back to prison for anything, right? If the PO just wants to be a jerk, you fail a drug test, whatever. You get caught selling drugs, you're going back to prison with a new charge. If you get caught with a gun, you're going back to prison for a long time with a new charge. Charlie just kept getting kicked back out. There was nobody that seemed to want to punish this dude for anything that he did. He was a clear in Scientology and Process Church. I absolutely found out that there are ties between Charles Manson and Scientology. Absolutely. You can look up that, and there's a lot of people that verify that. I never heard that he was clear. I didn't read that in any of the stuff. It didn't seem like he did it as maybe long enough to get clear, but that's just from the research that I've done. But we will have to see. I was a PO for a year. Mechanic, would you let a guy caught with a gun and dope walk back out of your office and go to the street? Well, you might if the federal government had this guy in some kind of a program. The program existed. This is not, right? It was part of Operation Chaos. However, if you're the CIA and you got this Operation Chaos going out there and you have all these hippies coming in and people that need care and whatever, why not let the MK Ultra boys get a shot at them too? I mean, you're running, this could absolutely benefit you. And if you trash the reputation of these people and you turn LSD, which was, tune in, turn out, everybody was really into this, right? Acid was catching traction as this opens your mind and it kills your ego. And there were big names that were advocating, yeah, you should be doing this stuff. And then they vilified hippies and LSD in one shot, in the nastiest murders and one of the most publicized. I mean, there have been terrible murders throughout history, but now we really had mass media, right, in a way that we hadn't before. And the Tate LaBianca murders were all over the place, right? This was a big deal. And it got crazy. The courtroom was a circus. Charlie has never acted normal since that period of time. But when you talk to people that did time with him before this, right, nobody, and I mean nobody, says the guy was a lunatic. People that did time with him said, no, man, this was a herder of goats, good to see you. Everybody said he was a fairly normal guy as far as convicts goes. This wasn't a guy in there telling people he was Jesus. This wasn't a guy in there, talking about saving the planet and all the stuff that Charlie just never stopped talking about after that brief period of time that he became violent by all accounts. Now, he didn't kill anybody, right? He did not kill anybody. I agree with you, Tara. Scientology was birthed from Crowley, but that's an opinion. I think it's a fat girl song. No, you know what? Here's the thing. I'm sorry, this will be a quick rant, but this is an easy thing to research, I promise. L. Ron Hubbard spent a lot of time with the guy that started Jet Propulsion Labs, JPL. Jack Parsons was his name. And I think more than likely it was Jack Parsons Labs until he blew himself up in some kind of a satanic ritual trying to bring some demon into the planet. They don't do jet propulsion. They do rocket propulsion, and they're two kind of different things. But they call it Jet Propulsion Labs. He blew himself up. That's how he died. But before that, he was living with L. Ron Hubbard, and they were doing sex rituals. The Babylon Working, I believe, was the name of one of them. He never met Crowley, but Crowley thought he was an idiot by all accounts. But Parsons and Crowley were doing a lot of communicating back and forth. And by all evidence, L. Ron Hubbard got very into it. He was super into the whole occult thing. But he absconded with a bunch of the guy's money and his wife. No joke. So, yeah, it may have been birthed there. But exactly how much influence Crowley had, or maybe just diving into that kind of evilness had an effect. But certainly there are ties that take him to Aleister Crowley. 1 degree of separation. And Crowley allegedly was giving all of the information to Jack Parsons about this Babylon working. And it was a sex ritual, by the way, done with Parsons, his then wife, and LRH. Roxana Mathis, you do not have to hang out here and listen to me talk about Charles Manson. I absolutely give you permission to walk away. You have a great night. This was something I talked about and asked people if they wanted me to do, and it was a universal yes. There are always people that aren't going to dig the things I'm doing tonight. The good news is I'll be back tomorrow. Have a great evening. God bless. So this narrative of Helter Skelter, it goes through the trial. He gets convicted. A bunch of the family go to jail, right? Go to prison. And Manson gets the death penalty, and it gets overturned not on any appeal or anything else. California just decides that the death penalty isn't cool. So Manson gets his sentence commuted to life in prison without the possibility, or no, with the possibility of parole. And he went up for parole a gazillion times. He always got shot down. That's facts about knowing Melcher had moved. He knew Melcher moved after the murder. He went and stole a telescope off of Melcher's new property. And it was actually, Melcher was living with Candace Bergen at the time. And there's some ties that have disappeared as well that said that Tex Watson, who was kind of Charles Manson's right-hand man in the family, had some interaction with Candace Bergen. She's denied it forever. But allegedly he sold her a wig. The guy used to be a wig salesman. And there was a lot going on, and Bugliosi was so tied into the Hollywood scene that one of the theories in the book's Chaos is that he was trying to hide the fact that this was a debaucherous partying scene with a bunch of people doing crazy stuff and filming it, and none of that was to come out. They didn't want to trash the reputation of Sharon Tate, and they didn't want to get into all of these people in Hollywood. Vincent Bugliosi was very concerned about what he was going to do when this was over. He was the true murderer. He did more murdering than anyone else. I wonder how much of those wigs were real hair. By all accounts, there were murders before this. The research does say that these guys might have killed other people. Oddly enough, all of them having to do with things like selling somebody dope that didn't go bang, right? Bad drugs, or trying to rip somebody off, the kind of stuff that convicts don't usually put up with very much. But the Melcher thing, he absolutely owned that home and was leasing it out to Sharon Tate. Now, I'm here to do the devil's business. Tex Watson, that's right. That is exactly what he said. Now, this book sold 7 million copies, and Vincent Bugliosi got really rich really quick. Sharon Tate's family showed up at every chance he had for parole and spoke strongly in favor of keeping him locked up. It's a fact. They did not miss one of his parole hearings. They also didn't miss it for Linda Kasabian, right, or any of the other people from the family. They were very serious about trying to keep all of them in forever, and I get that. I would have wanted to do the exact same thing if it was my family. There are a lot of threads in the story that Vincent Bugliosi gave us that are just BS. The people in the family said, yeah, we listen to the White Album occasionally. They made it sound as if Charles Manson worshipped the Beatles, and that the White Album, he literally spoke to him because of all of the acid that he was doing, and that is the reason that he went out and had these people killed, because he was going to start a race war, right? And he was going to be able to rule the black people after the race war was over. It doesn't jive, and here's why I struggle with it. There isn't an interview that Charles Manson has done on camera that I haven't seen. I don't think there's an interview that Manson has done that is just in writing that I haven't read. And Manson was bat crap crazy, right? Actually, it's a rape charge. It's not just statutory. She may have been really young, but he gave her Quaaludes as a way to have sex with her, right? So it wasn't just a matter of that. It was a little bit uglier than that. So there's a lot that's wrong with this narrative, especially considering that Charles Manson, if you can get an interview going with Charlie, because he's going to talk, he tries to act nuts, or he's really nuts, but he certainly likes playing with the people that interview him. But in every one of those interviews, what he said was, Melcher and I had a deal. He wasn't, I don't believe for a second that this was about anything other than that. When Manson was denied bond the last time, he asked the judge, Will, would you happen to have any honey buns? That's what I usually have this time of morning. Well, that's a big thing in prison. It's absolutely it's a prison thing, especially the monster ones. Yeah, Manson did not believe for a hot second, right, that this thing had anything to do. I mean, the Helter Skelter thing, imagine somebody putting a narrative on you and you going, what the hell are you talking about? Well, that's kind of what Charlie did until the very end. Now, that doesn't make it fact, doesn't make it true. But think about where Vincent Bugliosi is when he's writing this book. And then we're going to go on to Chaos and tell you how it was done by Tom O'Neill. But think of where Manson was and where the world was when this was being put together. Vincent Bugliosi literally has the people that are going to make his book sitting in court while this is going on. If that stinks to you, put a deuce in the chat, right? Put a deuce in the chat if that smells really bad to you, because it certainly does to me, right? This doesn't make a lot of sense. Are we talking about Squeaky Frome? She tried to kill Ford, if that's what someone is asking. She tried to shoot Gerald Ford. Squeaky was another member of the Manson family. It's fascinating to me that this was the narrative. He didn't, by all accounts, right? What he was convicted of was talking people into going to kill people. Now, felony murder will get you the same amount of time for talking somebody into killing somebody as it will for doing it themselves, right? Felony murder puts all of that in. It's like a getaway driver on a bank job. If the guy who goes in shoots the teller, the guy in the car shot her too. That's just how it works. It's always going to be that way. It's felony murder. However, Manson got the death penalty, and the people that did the killing, none of those. It was a very different trial. Everything about it was very unique. Hey, Kathy, who does number 2 work for? Well played. Good reference. It gets scary when you realize that the prosecution had exculpatory evidence that kind of showed a completely different narrative. According to the way our court system works, that has to be handed over to the defense. Bugliosi destroyed it. Every chance he got. The only thing he was going to allow to come out was this. And then the guy went on speaking tours and did all of these things that really propelled him into a level of stardom that attorneys hadn't gotten yet. At that point in our world, he became, you know, if a crime happened, like when the OJ thing happened, bring out Vincent Bugliosi. He can tell us how to solve this, because he just took this crazy Charles Manson stuff, figured it out like that, and tied it all together in this nice bun. And by all accounts, it's absolute horseshit. The United States of America had a vested interest in trashing, right? Yes, the music producer was Candace Bergen, absolutely. They had moved. Melcher hired a private security firm because he was terrified of who this guy was. Now, the day that this happens, right? The day that they go out to the Manson crime scene, there's a dude who, by all accounts, was probably a CIA operative. And it's difficult to figure out because a lot of these people, there wasn't the kind of research that is normally done like we have today. And any of the research that was being done ended up getting basically deep sixed by a guy that wanted to make a lot of money writing books, right? There was this guy that they say, his name was Reeve, was his first name. And he had 2 aliases, so it gets a little confusing. But he was at the Tate LaBianca murders 8 minutes, the Sharon Tate murder scene, 8 minutes before the cops got there. And his answer was, well, I was very close friends with Sharon Tate, and I called. I freaked out because she wasn't there, so I came out here. This guy ended up sending his family afterwards to Switzerland. And then he ends up moving to Switzerland to live with them. Moving to Switzerland isn't easy. I mean, I've done some research on being an expat. Switzerland's a tough country to move to, unless maybe you work for the CIA. But this cat was tied in with absolutely everybody. His name never got brought up at trial. How is there going to be a guy who arrives at the murder scene before the cops and this doesn't get brought up at trial? It's because Vincent Bugliosi was dirty. Now, it may have just been, I'm not saying that he was dirty because, he was working for anybody. I don't think that that's necessarily provable. But the fact that he was dirty is provable. Evidence disappeared all over the place. Notes got blacked out. I read during this period where I would only read true stories. So I took every word as gospel. It's funny that you use the word gospel because this has come to be known basically as like this is the precursor for a lot of the books and a lot of the stuff in true crime. And the way he wrote it, the narrative that he wrote, it's a page turner, and there's a crap load of horrific pictures in Helter Skelter. The middle of the book is all of the crime scene photos. He was ready to release that crap before he was writing the book while he was trying Manson. So basically, he was writing a novel and he was going to sell it to the jury. And the jury was pissed. And Charlie walks in and he's got a swastika carved in his forehead. You think any 12 people in there are going to take anything this dude does seriously? There have been people that have said, this is a guy that not only did Bugliosi get rich on this, he got famous and he has been abusive to people throughout his entire life. There's a whole line of people that he terrified. Moving to Switzerland requires, first of all, you're going to have to buy property there. I have an uncle who is amazingly wealthy. He owns a hospital that does eye surgeries. Very, very successful guy. And he wanted to go there with unlimited funds. And it took him about 12 years to pull this off. It is a very difficult thing to do. It was an awful book. But the first time I read it, I bought every word of it too. So did everyone else, because this was the narrative. And there weren't people out there running around. But while we thought no one was, Tom O'Neill, the guy that wrote Chaos, right, The Secret History of the CIA in the 60s, when he was writing that, for all of the 20 years, it started out as a magazine that hired him. And every time he started going, it got a little deeper. Now, here's my only criticism of the book Chaos. He doesn't give you a theory. He doesn't. He just shows you all of the inconsistencies and all of the places that very weird stuff overlap. Now, there are people who praise him for this, because if you take all of that stuff, thank you, David, if you take all of that stuff and you put it into your own theory, there's a certain bias, right? All he was saying is the helter-skelter theory is BS. And here's why. Why would this man destroy this? Why would this be done? How is Candace Bergen not being questioned on this, right? Allegedly, Manson and the family stole a telescope off of the porch where Melcher was living with Candace Bergen. This is after, right? This is after the two of them had the massive falling out and after the murders. And the telescope was pulled off and a note was left that said, I stole your telescope, so you obviously know where I live. Now, security's getting hired and all of this stuff, right? Don't you think that might have been something that should have ended up into the discovery? Maybe that should have been handed off to the defense? No need, because it didn't fit the helter-skelter narrative. And anytime something didn't fit that narrative, Bugliosi just threw it out. That's not how lawyers work, right? O'Neill footnotes every bit of this. He interviews everyone. You know who he interviewed? Vincent Bugliosi, who lost his mind. Over the course in the beginning, he was just asking questions, and then he finally confronted him and said, hey, there's a bunch of missing evidence. There's a bunch of why didn't you talk about the CIA guy that was there 8 minutes before the cops at the crime scene? Did he run in and write pigs on the wall? Right? Did he go in and write Helter Skelter on the wall? What the hell was the dude doing there before the cops got there? That's the guy you need to investigate. If you show up and someone's already there, everyone's dead. Yeah, maybe we ought to hear from this guy. He doesn't show up in the trial. You know why? Because Bugliosi didn't hand any of this over to the defense. That's not just being a dirtbag. It's illegal. It's illegal. But the Central Intelligence Agency was running an operation that they called Chaos. And the goal of Chaos was to infiltrate the counterculture and trash it. This is your bogey, whether you had anything to do with it or not. If you can get the prosecution to do this right, you can stop spending any money on Operation Chaos, because this is absolutely going to destroy the counterculture. And it did, right? Summer of Love was over. People wouldn't pick up hitchhikers. If you had long hair, they were terrified of you. This worked. Now, the cynic will say, so they took Charlie in, they gave him tons of acid. At one point, they moved him to Mexico, right? So they could do some stuff down there, not on U.S. soil, while he's on probation, right? He gets busted, does all the stupid stuff. They get him out of trouble. He keeps going to this clinics, keeps still working with Dr. Jolly, right? This gets kind of into that conspiracy range, but it makes a hell of a lot of sense. And now a guy that's just kind of been a pot smoker, now he's playing the guitar a lot and he's giving acid to all of his followers, and he's kind of turning them into Manchurian candidates too. Think about it. What was the goal of MK Ultra? To build an assassin. And we did it to people that didn't know we were doing it to them. That's our government. That's a fact, right? Most of the stuff got shredded when the director of the FBI, or I'm sorry, the director of Central Intelligence was leaving in the early 70s, he destroyed all of it, every bit of it. I was 13 when the murders happened. I got interested because of the LaBiancas. They got to me. Quiet, nice people, nothing flashy. And they made no sense in the race war narrative, right? They wanted to say it was a copycat murder. That's what Bugliosi said at first, right? He thought that might be a copycat, probably not the family, because it doesn't work. It doesn't work. They weren't the flashy, and they were immigrants. This was a really odd part of this. And Bugliosi can't do much about it. I mean, the murders are done. There's nothing you can do about it. So it wasn't played up in any way. If you had a good defense attorney, he'd go, what the hell is going on with that? Right? You weren't going in and killing people that matches the first crime scene, right? Famous people, rich people. You're trying to start this race war. You know, they weren't poor. But why did you go and kill these two people? Well, there are some theories about this. And once again, it has to do with proximity to a house that Charlie was giving these people instructions to go do things, but he wasn't doing it. So Charlie can send people out when they get to the door and the door opens and you see Sharon Tate. And Charlie said, there's going to be a blonde woman there, probably thinking Candace Bergen, right? There's going to be a blonde woman there. They went in there and murdered the wrong people. Maybe Charlie turned them into Manchurian candidates. It's a funny thing, too, because the MK Ultra program, which was designed to do this, right? What did they say about Charlie? He was a Svengali. This was a guy that had this hypnotic ability over all of the people that he was talking to. The people out at Spawn Ranch were like disciples of this guy. They hung on every word. He would sometimes go off on lectures for 8 hours or so while everybody listened to everything that he said. And he talked about being the Messiah and all of this. He was going to lead them into a new world or whatever. By all accounts, they did a lot of partying out there, and Charlie definitely had control. Here are some theories that other people have put out. When, what's his name would go out there, Melcher would go out there, Charlie would give him women. Yeah, take 3 of them. You ladies, go do whatever he tells you to do. They're gonna do what Charlie told them to do. Now, did he have that control as a convict who spent his entire life in prison and wasn't ridiculously articulate? Didn't seem all of that charming. But I'll tell you what, I don't know if you guys have ever done LSD, but you can come up with some pretty twisted ideas. And it's 8 hours on that stuff. If you did that to people every 4 days and just continued to work with them again and again, you could end up with some really, really weird stuff happening in people's minds. Tommy, do you think this case was lost when Nixon declared him guilty before his trial? I think that was all part of chaos, right? And then Manson held up a newspaper in court that said Nixon, right? That should have been a mistrial. Goodbye, it's overdone, right? They were going to convict Charles Manson because it was going to do damage to the counterculture. If we didn't want to do damage to the counterculture, we wouldn't have had Operation Chaos, where we were spending money to put up clinics and do all these things so we could weasel our way in to the counterculture and what they were doing to try to shut it down, right? Now, we know there was CIA crawling all over the Haight-Ashbury area of San Francisco. This was definitely by design. Now, O'Neill spends 20 years researching this. And in this book, he doesn't just say, here's my theory. It's footnoted to the extreme. He is an exhaustive researcher, and a researcher in the real sense of the word. And by that, I mean, he's going to tell you where all the problems are, but he's not going to try to tie this together. You know, he does not have a theory in the true sense of the word. But his theory is Helter Skelter is absolute BS. And the more people that look at both books, one is a self-serving narrative that told him, yes, absolutely. And I'll tell you something terrifying. They also made a case against drugs being bad with cases like this too. Yeah, and Art Linkletter's daughter. Put a 2 in the chat if you remember Art Linkletter's daughter's suicide. 59 minutes in. I think I was probably good until I said suicide. Oh, well. Oh, well, you can't win them all. I think Manson was heavily MK Ultra, says Lacey. Yeah, I think that's where this points to. Yeah, so this is the narrative that we've always heard. Art Linkletter's daughter stepped out of a window tripping on acid. Research that has been done on this said that his girl committed suicide. It had nothing to do with drugs, but they asked him to try to do damage to this nasty drug. And allegedly, that's what happened. It wasn't an LSD trip. It had nothing to do with it. But he was going to take the team to try to help America and hurt the counterculture and demonize acid. The worse they can make it, the better. And if that sounds crazy, well, here's the deal on that, Black Dragon. I think this is very intellectually solid. Black Dragon Production says Manson wasn't a victim of MK Ultra. He was trained how to do it. I think this is pretty intuitive, and it makes a lot of sense. But the only problem I have with that is now Charlie spends his entire life in prison and never says, hey, they trained me to do this. Your government showed me how to do this. This was an operation. Here's my theory, and it's just mine. This isn't, but this is based on reading everything that was in Chaos. It makes more sense to me that both of those things were happening. I think that Charlie was being dosed up on acid, and they were working on him, right? But Charlie was going out and doing the same thing to his people. And again, in the shooting of RFK, Sirhan, 77 people watched Sirhan shoot him from standing, 3 or 4 feet? Some people say as much as 8 feet in front of him. JFK got shot in the back of the head. But there's absolutely a ton of evidence that makes it seem like, right, that he was MK Ultra, Sirhan. He disappeared for 3 months. Nobody in his family knew who he was. Didn't go to work, didn't show up at an apartment, anything. 3 months gone. He claimed in interviews that when he fell off that horse, he went to the hospital and he was in there for 3 months. The hospital said he was there for 3 hours or an hour and a half or something like that. How do those things coexist if they weren't doping this guy up? And then one of the other doctors who was big in MK Ultras on the other side of the country told 2 prostitutes that, yeah, I was the one that trained him. But what's interesting is every day at the racetrack when he was going to work, he was trying to hypnotize all of the people that worked there. Said he started to get really into this whole hypnotism thing. And I think we're seeing a pattern. I think that some of these people that they were experimenting on, because keep in mind, it was happening in Canada, right, at hospitals in Canada. It was happening at multiple hospitals in the United States. So while they may be following the same script, every doctor is going to be doing it a little bit differently. And protocols, I mean, do you have protocols for something like this? This is an experimental. It's experimenting on people. So I don't know that there were protocols. Good points. Another thing, ask yourself, why wasn't he thrown in jail when he constantly violated parole, especially with a pistol? Okay, you get the coolest probation officer in history, right? And they'll let you get high. They'll let you screw up. They might let you get in a fist fight. You got a pistol, you're going away. I mean, that is the ultimate violation. That just says I have no respect for authority. And this guy had a criminal record from here to Boston, right? This is a really fascinating concept. It really is. It's the real Mr. Mad says, what do you think about Jackie Kennedy putting a 38 special under JFK's chin? I don't think there's a chance of that. I don't. I do believe that there may have been a second shooter. I don't believe the narrative, but I also have to be reasonable enough to say it's such a massive assassination that maybe I just can't take the narrative because I can't stand the idea that a failure like Lee Harvey Oswald took out somebody that was really trying to do things. He was the president of the United States. When one insect can do something like that, you start going, it can't be that way. And there's a phenomenon. Psychologists study this. The bigger the tragedy, the bigger a conspiracy we expect. So you can't name anything that has happened in my lifetime that there's not a conspiracy around, right? So Oklahoma City, most people believe that there was an inside job. And we know the stories of the phone calls and the fake trucks and all of these things. And the fact that the truck should have blown up on both sides, but it only seemed to go in one direction. That's what they call a shape charge. So there's a lot on all of these. But again, we either have to believe that everything that has ever happened in our country is a conspiracy, or we have to say to ourselves, maybe this is something that we do as humans. And there's a lot of stuff to back that up. One of my favorite examples is there is a huge thing where they compare the Kennedy assassination to the Lincoln assassination. And they say Lincoln's secretary's name was Kennedy, Kennedy's secretary's name was Lincoln. They were born 100 years apart. They joined the Senate in the same year, 100 years apart. They got elected to office the same time frame, 100 years apart. Most of that's not true, but everybody says it. And if it was all true, what are we saying? Well, once they found out how they took out Kennedy, we figured we would tie all this. We look for patterns. They've done science on this too, where you look, right? You look at something, they show you a picture and it's a field of flowers, right? And you see it for 3 seconds and your brain starts looking for patterns. And in this big field, there's like 6 or 7 white roses. and they stick out like Wednesday in the middle of the week. When that goes off, they go, what did you see? Well, it was a field. How many, what kind of flowers? There's white ones. Do you know how many? About 6. What are the other colors of the flowers? Nothing. Because your brain went directly to the pattern and the rest of it just falls away. This is why we get so many false testimonies from people. RFK was fascinating because 77 people agreed. That's kind of crazy. They all agreed there was more gunshots than Sirhan had in his gun. That's the worst conspiracy ever. That one I absolutely believe is provable that it's BS. He had powder burns, right? You can go look at the photos. He had powder burns, stippling on the back of his head. You got to be an inch away to do that, inch to 3. Certainly not 3 feet. But it's odd to me that what Manson was able to do and stay out of jail, that's really, that to me is a smoking gun. And it stinks of somebody higher up the chain going, don't put that guy away. We're doing something with him. And maybe they weren't training him. Maybe he was bringing people in there to train, but something happened because why not tell? You're in there a long time. I can see going, I'm a convict. I'm not ratting on anybody. But after about 10 or 15 years, like he never remembered any of this at any point and talked to people about it. That to me sounds like some heavy duty brainwashing, but who knows? Bugliosi was a nut job. The helter-skelter theory was garbage made up out of lies, and people lied on the witness stand. Terry Melcher absolutely lied on a lot of people did, including Manson family members who were cut deals and have recanted their stories so many times. And I don't mean people who go, well, I'm a Mansonite. I'm part of the Manson family. People that went, whoa, I got nothing to do with that. But I'll tell you what, Vincent Bugliosi came up with this story and we were forced to tell it. The most disturbing thing to me is that while this trial is going on, the people that are going to be doing his book are in the room. Yeah, there's a lot still not released on JFK. That's a fact. It's bizarre to me. And the more that you research this, the more disturbing it is. But it's bizarre to me that in the United States of America, there were 129 victims that we picked because of whatever their medical condition was. They showed up at the right time in the right hospital. And then we absolutely destroyed their life by trying to see if we could brainwash them by using heavy-duty hallucinogenics. And in most cases, destroyed these people's lives, right? I did know that Gerald Ford was part of the Warren Commission. Now, critical thinking, though, says this. You got any idea when they do these commissions, they're not going to outside sources to find people. You're going with politicians. And they're going to be very large groups of people that are overlooking these things. So a lot of times these names get recycled through things again and again. The stuff that freaks me out a little bit is like the Bush family and the ties to the CIA. There are some things that really do freak me out. But some of the stuff, we look for patterns that may not be as important as you see. The more that you see and hear about, the more information disappears. We definitely live in a world where you can't believe the narrative. And this is one of the grossest examples of that in history. And Helter Skelter became the Bible of true crime. It became like an exalted book. This is how you do true crime. That's how you prosecute somebody, right? You don't go in there and say, well, here's some blood evidence. And yes, we were able to find this out at Spawn Ranch. No, you go in there and say, have I got a story for you? It's acid. It's the Beatles. It's, this is terrifying stuff. But without a doubt, I'm even worried about Tucker Carlson and even Alex Jones being tied to the CIA. I still love some Alex Jones, though. Alex Jones is a person that people like to mock. Alex Jones, my first exposure to him was he got into Bohemian Grove, right? He was one of the first people to ever do that. And I don't know, say what you will. He lost $1 billion lawsuit. $1 billion? Man, you're a threat if they're hitting you with $1 billion lawsuit. Most of the committees and commissions seem like performance art to me. Yeah, that's Barbara Waite. That's because it is performance art. And I saw Jane Aldrich that said, you talk about an echo chamber, the Warren Commission. It's amazing to think about things like, so if this is BS, if Bugliosi knows that there's no race war and there's no helter-skelter and there's none of this stuff, then why run with that narrative, right? And you have to ask yourself, was it just for cash? Was he protecting people in Hollywood? Was he protecting the Central Intelligence Agency from Operation Chaos and from MK Ultra? Because I'll tell you something, Charlie ain't right. And Charlie was right before he got out of prison. Probation officers, everybody that talked to him, nobody said, this man needs to be on medication, he's psychotic. Or this man doesn't make any sense when you talk to him. He goes off on these tangents and dances and does these. None of that happened. Through an entire career of being a criminal and a lowlife, you talk to shrinks every week, right? Every week you're talking to shrinks. This is something that happens a lot. And he was in federal prison. He was at Terminal Island, which is a place that has a ton of medical stuff, right? This is a guy that was looked at, studied, everything under the sun. So what happens from that nonviolent petty thief that everybody seemed to get along with, read the Bible a lot, seemed to be and then boom, he gets out, becomes violent, right? He's carrying a gun. That was never him. And he's got a little harem living out at a former movie studio ranch. This stuff all seems very, very odd. Why did Nixon give Elvis a badge? Did that make any sense? You know what? Elvis was popular as hell. A lot of this, that's stupid. And I agree with you, that's dumb. But if you can get a photo op of Elvis Presley in the Oval Office handing him a badge, they're just hoping maybe some kids that see that. I mean, that's just propaganda is all it is, straight propaganda. Elvis was a big freaking deal, right? I think that's probably what Nixon was doing. But the more research, I'm still researching the RFK stuff. And Richard Nixon has a son, or had a son, named Don. And there's a lot of really odd stuff about him knowing an awful lot about the RFK assassination. Jack Ruby's psychiatrist was the same guy that was involved in the free clinic in San Francisco. His name was Jolly, Black Dragon Productions. That would be Dr. Jolly. And yeah, by all accounts, he absolutely went out and interviewed Jack Ruby and had worked with him. I was going to actually finish with this because this is probably a show we got to do more than one of, but I'm going to keep going. We're going to talk a little bit longer on this. But this is the kind of stuff that I talked about when I was talking about RFK. Start linking all of these things together. They don't get rid of Vincent Bugliosi after all of the dirt that they got on him. They keep this guy as a prosecutor knowing he's stalking people and threatening children, right? He had a pregnant mistress who he beat the bark off of until she lost the child, right? This happened. This is not the kind of guy that you're going to keep around. He's an embarrassment, but they just bury it and keep him, right? All of these things, when you keep adding this, what are the odds? What are the odds? What are the odds? Well, it gets to the point where it's ridiculous. I think the government, for whatever reason, has been trying to incite a race war for a long time. Maybe it's a form of acceleration. I think in this, that's actually a pretty interesting angle, Tara. It's actually a pretty interesting angle. I think that there's probably, they certainly seem like that's the case, right? Even now, if you talk to the average white or black person, they don't believe that we live in this racist world that everybody keeps pushing the narrative on, right? My life was saved by a black guy in a federal prison. My best friend on earth is a black guy I met in federal prison. He doesn't believe any of this. He laughs about it every time we talk about it. Bugliosi wrote my favorite true crime book, And the Sea Will Tell. Not a big fan of the man, though. Yeah, he's a hard guy to be a big fan of. He also had a ghostwriter on Helter Skelter, but it was his story and it was his narrative. And he literally is writing it at the exact same time he's doing the prosecution, and the people paying him are sitting in the stands. Tara says it's a class thing, in my opinion. I think if your theory's right, it's a manipulation thing. If you've got two groups of people that hate each other, then you need a big government to take care and make sure that those people are protected. And more often than not, you're willing to give up your rights for protection, which is awful. But things like the Patriot Act, things that get ushered in after terror attacks, these things we go, well, you know what? If you got to put a camera in my bedroom, at least the terrorists won't be coming and taking down buildings or any of these things. So is it a class war? It's who does it benefit? I'm not being a jerk, but who does that benefit? Because if you have one class that feels like they are really, really being taken advantage of, eventually they will revolt. This has gone on throughout history. However, if you can just keep them pissed and they have riots and they burn cities, you can manipulate the currency, bet the Forex exchange, because if half of Chicago is burning and you got watts going on, the dollar's going to drop, and it's going to drop by a lot. And if you know these are coming, then you can bet billions of dollars that the currency is going to drop. And when it does, you're going to get paid back way more than you bet. And the average transaction on the Forex exchange takes less than 24 hours. They don't have to buy this stuff and hold on to it. You're just betting the dollar against the yen, or you're betting the dollar against the peso, or the dollar against the ruble back in the day, right? And the Forex exchange daily is more money than the gross domestic product, the gross national product, rather, of the United States of America. We don't make that much money in the US that they're blowing daily on the foreign exchanges. We have proof that George Soros and his family got rich this way, destabilizing economies and then betting on them. Well, what's going on right now? Right now, we've got people up in Portland and we've got people in Chicago who are peacefully protesting, right? If you stop a government truck from going into a government building, that's a felony. Whether anybody likes that or not, that's the truth. And I made a short the other day where I was talking about this. You know, they had the No Kings rally. If you can have a No Kings rally, then there's not an issue with free speech. Because if there isn't free speech, everybody at that rally would be in prison. Because all free speech does is protect you from going to prison. The woman there that went like this, she's not going to have a job and no one's going to like her again. She exercised her free speech. God bless her. She can say anything she wants. But you're not protected by being an asshole, right? We legally will allow you to be an asshole in the United States. But that doesn't mean that everybody around you is going to go, yeah, you're all right, you can keep your job. Your boss can go, oh my God, I don't want you anywhere near my company. You're a sick woman. That's his free speech. He believes you're not quite right. But we want to infringe on his opinions and all of that because she has this one. I promise you, we get the free speech thing screwed up a lot in this country. Free speech doesn't mean that if Jimmy Kimmel says something, his boss can't say, we're taking you off the air, right? You still answer to your boss. And if your boss happens to work for something that has a contract with the United States that allows you to broadcast, he wasn't on HBO, right? He wasn't on Cinemax. He was on a broadcast company, which means they have a license from the Federal Communications Commission to broadcast. It's a whole shit show, but the bottom line becomes free speech ain't dead. If it was, that rally would have been a hoot, right? It would have been a hoot. Yeah, this is actually a wildly intelligent comment. And I think a lot of people in the audience have said this already in one way or another, right? Because this absolutely is a real deal. Someone just said, I think more people today are in favor of a king. Honestly, and I'm not trying to bum anybody out, but I don't think that passes critical thinking, right? The man was elected, whether you like it or not. And I'm not a fan, but the man was elected. He's not suggesting that we do away with elections. He's saying what we need to do is try to make it so they can't be stolen. If you knew, you can do research on this. It doesn't take a long time. Find out how many people dead voted in the last couple of elections. That's a problem. If you got somebody 125 years old voting, right, it's been dead for 10 years, or if you got people taking buses to drive from one place to another, right? This is a problem. If you're busing in people from other states to vote in your state, one of the nastiest things that I've ever heard in my life is that it is racist to ask somebody for an ID to vote. If you critical think that, what are you saying? There are certain groups that are too stupid to get IDs? For real. I mean, you have to have an ID to cash checks. You have to have an ID to do everything in America. You got to have an ID. But they can't seem to get one for voting. It's insulting to some people that I really love. It's a dumb thing. I think without voter ID, I promise you they're cheating. And why wouldn't they? I promise you. Let me go into banks and cash stuff without IDs, and I probably would have ended up doing a lot more crime. You have to have some kind of structure so you can go, oh, you're Tommy. Without that, we're in deep trouble. The system failed Charlie back in his childhood. It absolutely did, right? Yes, the Republicans recently bought Dominion. I have not seen that yet, Black Dragon, but that might not be such a bad thing. I would like to see us do away with machines. I'd like to see people go in and vote and use that black dye that they put on their fingers in other parts of the world. I'm sorry. I think we could probably figure it out. That's absolutely ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. I'm sorry, it is. We can go back. Do you realize how many problems we've had elections with? Do you realize how many contested elections we've had? I'm not being disrespectful, but how about the hanging Chad? Does anybody remember the hanging Chad? You mean, why does he have it? That Hillary Clinton is a criminal. This is no longer debatable. The Clinton crime family built the Clinton Global Initiative with the help of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. This is no longer debatable. I mean, that's why he was flying around in that plane. Everyone goes, oh, he was on that plane 37 times. Yeah, he was going to make $10 million speaking engagements. 80% of the people, I'll say 60 because I don't know the exact number, but I believe it's in the 80s. But at least 60% of every person that met with Hillary Clinton when she was in office had donated to the Clinton Global Initiative. The reason they got rid of those servers that she had at her house and destroyed 30,000 emails, which she said was about yoga and family stuff. That's a lot of yoga for a woman that doesn't look like she does a lot of yoga. What she was getting rid of was evidence of the fact that she sold the office. If you wanted to get in and talk to her, if you wanted this done or that done, she held 2 press conferences as Secretary of State to say, we're not going to be, here's our new deal with these people. Switzerland, right, wanted to information on people that had bank accounts over there from the United States. Hillary stepped in. The list went from 40 some odd thousand to 4,000 Americans on that list. And then that bank donated between the bank itself and their people millions of dollars to the Clinton Global Initiative that fast. And I'm telling you something, you're going to see absolutely. I'm not telling you it was a smooth election. I'm just telling you that this shit's been going on for a really long time. It certainly isn't a Trump thing, right? This is really, there has been contested elections for a really, really long time. And history says stolen elections. I'm a JFK fan, but the mob gave him Illinois, right? History has absolutely proven that the mob delivered Illinois for JFK, particularly Chicago, right? You need that big city to carry Illinois. And the mob made it happen. So we've been doing really effed up stuff in this country for such a long time. Yeah, Hillary lost. Well, then tell me who you'd like me to talk about. Huh? You want me to talk about Kamala, or are you talking about Joe Biden? You want me to believe that more Americans voted for Joe Biden than any other human being that ever got elected president, because that's what they had to do to steal that. More people voted for Joe Biden who didn't campaign or leave his basement. That doesn't pass the smell test, not in any way, shape, or form. When he went out, he couldn't put 6,000 people in a stadium. Trump was flying around the country and booking them one right after the other, standing room only. When that laptop came out, the FBI had looked at that laptop and verified it a year or more before that broke, that story. They knew what was on it. But all of these people in the intelligence community signed off and said, yeah, none of this is real, man. This stuff is just typical Russian disinformation. They knew that was bullshit. That's a stolen election. I won't bum you out, but that's a stolen election. They call that the October surprise. It's been happening in the US since elections started. Something happens in October, right before we go to the polls in November, that destroy one party or the other. The problem was they weren't going to let that happen, right? Crossfire hurricane, right? All of these operations that took place are sedition, right? You're trying to overthrow a president, that's called sedition. You can do it this way, or you can do it by bullshitting. But either way, if you're trying to take over or you're trying to dethrone someone that was elected in the country, that's a felony. And it's a felony that carries a buttload of time. In fact, depending on how you do it, they can put you to death. Right? Article 2 of our Constitution is pretty freaking clear on this stuff. Sedition. I'm telling you what happened there. And I'm not a Trump fan, but I'm a fan of the truth. You know, that's really where we're at. I'm a fan of the truth. And everyone's crying, man. He's arresting the people from the previous administration. Why don't you do a Google search and see how many people the Biden administration arrested from the Trump crew? Because the numbers are a little different. However, what these people are being arrested for, somebody sent me a thing and said Comey's innocent. Comey admitted it. He went on and absolutely admitted it. JFK, by today's standards, would be called an extreme right-winger. Yeah, you know what? A lot of people say that. What he would be, though, is definitely a centrist, right? He wouldn't have been a left wing by today's standards. So he would be more like Bill, like Bill Maher kind of. The classic liberal believed more in free speech than anything. The birthplace of free speech was Berkeley, California, right? They were the first people to all they talked about. And then Berkeley doesn't let speakers come to their campus anymore because they don't agree with what they say. When free speech dies, so does society. And I don't mean free speech in terms of the protesters. I'm saying universities going, we'll let one party come and talk to us because we think they're right. We won't let the other party come and talk to us because we think they're wrong, right? A debate doesn't happen. An echo chamber doesn't happen, right? I mean, an echo chamber happens. That's all we're doing. That's a bummer, but it's what's happening. And it's why people say, I can't have this person come to my house for Thanksgiving, because you couldn't have a debate with them, right? Honestly, I'm not trying to be a dickhead, but if you look at talk radio, what percentage of talk radio is right wing, right? Millions and millions of people every day listening to right wing radio. Look at the numbers for left wing. That would lead you to believe that one group of voters spends a lot of time talking about politics. The other group gets their politics from TikTok or from late night television comedians. It's a very difficult thing to have a debate with somebody who hasn't done any of the homework. You know what? We can do it again just for laughs. Most of you people know this, right? But if I say, do we have a convicted rapist in the White House? Right? When I say put a 2 in the chat if you think we have a convicted rapist in the White House, normally I get a crap load of 2s. Man was never convicted of rape, right? Rape is a crime. It is tried in criminal court. He wasn't convicted of that. In fact, what he was convicted of had nothing to do with that. He was convicted of, well, here's the thing. It wasn't. He was convicted in that case, right, of slander. When that woman said that he did this, he said some stuff back that was over the top, but they didn't get him into criminal court. She didn't sue him for the sexual assault stuff and win. That's not what happened. But it's been repeated so many times. We all saw he was not Spooky Poo. No, he was not. He was found guilty of what in criminal court? I mean, in civil court, because he wasn't found liable. Yeah, liable in slander, but he was not found anything having to do with, but the world believes it. And if you keep repeating it, Kamala Harris continues to say that this was the closest election of this century, right? Yeah, he was convicted of slander. It's not the closest election, but she's going to keep saying that. And Joe Biden got more votes than any president in history. You couldn't sell me that. There's no way you could sell me that BS. When Biden was at his best, he was a really decent campaigner. He was sharp. By the end of his life, look, he didn't leave the basement for a reason. He didn't leave the basement for a reason, but they pushed it through. They were going to make it happen. It's terrifying. It's terrifying. Doesn't? And I'm not a right-winger. I know everybody thinks that. I'm certainly not a MAGA guy. I'm pretty unhappy about the Epstein files. I voted for Trump because I thought Kamala Harris was an absolute idiot. I'm sorry, I really did. She's not very bright. I saw her teleprompter go down. And in the process, she said, 32 days to election. If your teleprompter goes down and you can't talk about what you actually believe, like I'm doing right now, for maybe a minute and a half, you probably shouldn't be the president of the United States. She went, 32 days. Yeah, 32 days. And she just kept repeating it until they could get the teleprompter back up. That's not someone you need in the Oval Office. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but for the love of God. They threw the towel at Trump for everything they could make up. I love Trump and I will vote for him again. Well, let's hope we don't vote for him again. No disrespect, but I do hope we keep the 2-term thing. I don't think it's healthy for us to have a president for more than 2 terms. I think the founding fathers would agree on this. You know, what we don't want are dynasties. And I think the Bush family was a dynasty. I think the Clintons are a terrifying crime family. We have some people, Kamala Harris would laugh at that. You know what? She's awful. She's her word salads. This is not a woman that, and I'll be honest with you, man, as a guy that does what I do for a living, I think she's got a pretty thumping either drug problem or drinking problem. Because there are days she's sharp as a tack, and the next day she is absolutely slurring like mad. You know, I'm not mad at you for loving Bush or any of them. I'm not. No, Spooky Pook, wasn't sexual assault either. It's a decent, it never happened. God bless you. But look it up. See what he was convicted of. He was convicted of slander, not sexual assault. And this has happened to me, right? People will say things about you and take things out of context and say things that aren't true. And you know what? Even if I hate him, the truth is important. I don't like Sean Combs. Diddy is one of the worst human beings on planet Earth. You looked it up and it said he was convicted of sexual assault, then you need to learn how to do research, sunshine. No disrespect. But if you're looking on YouTube and seeing a video that someone made that said, Trump convicted of sex, never happened. Never happened. Research is when you go and pull the articles or you pull the court records and read them. He was not. Yeah, you didn't. If you did, you really need to work on it, because I promise you, I spent a lot of time on this. I'd have done a show on it. I promise you. If he was, but that isn't what happened. It's not what happened. I voted for Bill Clinton back then, even as a Republican. You know what? I love that as an idea. Right? Good night, Cindy. I'm a professional personal trainer, exercise specialist. It's unbelievable, the slander and people that don't know. That's why I have 2 insurances and a great lawyer. That's probably a good idea, right? Yeah, here's the thing. Misinformation is king right now because it pays. It pays, right? Videos will come out this week. The number of people who saw a video that said Trump is going to pardon Diddy and he's going to be out on Friday, and they're not going to do any more research, and they're going to tell all of their friends that Trump is getting ready to pardon Diddy. It's clickbait. It gets people there. It doesn't make any sense to me that they roll with this. These are Oliver People shades. You know what? Reese knows who that is. What's up, Reese? Good to have you here, babe. Glad you popped in. I don't know who that is, but I dig these glasses. Unfortunately, the lenses don't seem to hold up, right? I've had these things about 2 years, and now the lenses don't work as strong as they used to. I didn't realize they wore out, but apparently that's a thing. So I'm going to have to get me some new ones. It's a bummer, but it is the way it works. People, you know what? A lot of people are going to get angry at me, and it's just the way it is. But I came out and I talked people into, right? He did have a civil suit. The only thing that he has been convicted of was slander. There was a civil suit. She did not win. He had to pay her for the and got fines. Shut up and pay. Really, his convictions are for fraud charges. Well, here's the thing. Do you mean the convictions that came from, what is that lovely woman's name that is now under arrest and was housing 2 criminals? They may have been family members, but Letitia James, right, has 2 relatives with warrants renting 2 of her 3 homes. This woman took cash, right, from the state to buy her condo. If you realize exactly how hard they tried to overthrow this guy, and look, man, I'm not a fan, but truth is dying, and it's dying at a rate that is just ugly, man. John, have a great night. It's the problem is that truth is dead. I can hang up right now, and I can put up a video right now that says X person, pick any politician you want, caught for insider trading. And I can do a 2-hour show on it. I can lie about every single thing that happens, right? Or just pass on misinformation. I did it throughout the Diddy trial. The Diddy case. I don't like Diddy, but some of the stuff that I reported on was horseshit. And I didn't know how to do research. What I was doing was hearing someone that said something, and I'm like, this guy's got 4 million views. He can't be lying, right? This woman's killing it. She's the most popular person in the entire genre. She's got to be telling the truth. Then I started doing things like pulling court cases and started looking at actually what was filed versus what people were saying. And some of the best and brightest were just bullshitting everybody for paychecks. And I know this because I called people on it, and their response, and I'm not saying this about Sean Atwood before anybody says it, but there were people, Sean's a good dude, but there were people who said to me, you know the deal? Shut up, we're making big money. I'm not going to do that again. I don't care if everybody leaves. But I promise you, I'm going to research this stuff, man. Right? And I'm not going to put misinformation out there. But I'm also going to call people on stuff that, man, if you haven't researched it, go read the court cases. Don't Google it. Right? Don't AI it. Go get Pacer or go get Nexus Lexus or Westlaw or any of these that literally just pull the cases out. Then you can read it, right? That makes more sense. Because even newspaper articles, somebody sent me a newspaper article that has absolutely been recanted, but they don't recant newspaper articles on the front, right? It's not a front page shit. Cindy G, love you. I'm not going to be here much longer, but I'm getting on that time of the night, people. I've gone a little bit long, and I have a phone call to make. So I am going to be cutting this short. My opinion on the Manson thing, I know we got a little bit off. My opinion on the Manson thing is fairly simple. Vincent Bugliosi's book was a BS book written to make him a lot of money. And sadly, the narrative for the book was how they convicted Charles Manson. He's not a good person, but he got screwed. He should have had a fair trial. He did not get a fair trial, right? That's a problem. And you know what? It's really easy to hate Charles Manson and go, who cares? Because you're next. Once we're allowed to do that to anybody, it's a slippery slope. What stops them from doing that to you if they decide that you're the bad guy? Charlie's a bad guy. Then take the evidence of him being a bad guy and play it straight. But you see, in our country, we never let something that epic go without spinning the shit out of it. And the people in government at the time wanted to vilify the left. Hey, sound like a real right-winger, don't I? The right wing wanted to destroy the counterculture left movement. And they did everything within their power to make that happen. So when Operation Chaos got to look at what was happening after the murders, whether or not they orchestrated them, there's no proof to that, right? There's no proof to that. But once you realize that this thing fit their narrative so perfectly, Vincent Bugliosi, whether they were paying him, threatening him, he was part of it. But nothing about that makes sense, man. But nothing makes sense about that. I'm Tommy. I'll see you on the next one. God bless 99.9% of you. Have a great night.